She could taste the betrayal before she even opened her eyes, metallic, bitter, like swallowing broken glass mixed with ash. The kind of taste that told her everything she thought was real had just shattered into 1,000 irretrievable pieces. Before we continue, please subscribe. And let know where you are watching from. Your support means a lot. The rain came down in sheets so thick Brielle couldn't tell where the storm ended and her tears began. Both soaked through her torn dress, both turned the forest floor beneath her bare feet into something treacherous and unforgiving. Her lungs burned with each ragged breath, but she didn't stop running. Couldn't stop. Behind her, the howls rose like a chorus of damnation, 20 wolves, maybe more, all bearing the scent of the Blackthorn pack. All hunting her. Not them. Not the pack she'd called family for 3 years. Not the wolves who'd sworn protection when Kieran brought her across their borders with that look in his eyes that made her believe in safety again. But those howls carried no mercy now. Only bloodlust. Only the singular focus of predators who'd been given permission to kill. Her left shoulder screamed where the guard's claws had torn through skin and muscle during her escape from the holding cell. Blood ran hot down her arm, leaving a trail any wolf could follow even through this downpour. She pressed her right hand against the wound, trying to slow the flow, but the metallic scent only grew stronger. It mixed with something else, something she'd been hiding for 6 weeks now, something that pulsed beneath her ribcage with a rhythm that wasn't quite her own. The child. The heir. The secret that would get her killed if anyone discovered it before she crossed into neutral territory. Thunder cracked overhead, so violent it seemed to split the sky in half. Lightning illuminated the forest in stark white flashes, turning the twisted pines into skeletal fingers reaching for her throat. She stumbled over an exposed root, went down hard on her knees in the mud. Pain exploded up her thighs, but she was moving again before her mind could fully register it. 3 years of living among wolves had taught her that hesitation meant death. The Blackthorn wolves were gaining. She could hear individual paws now, hitting the ground in synchronized rhythm. Could smell their collective rage, sharp and acrid, like burning fur and copper. They wanted blood. Her blood. And they'd been authorized to take it by the very alpha who'd once whispered promises against her skin in the darkness of his chambers. Kieran. His name was a wound that wouldn't close, a betrayal that cut deeper than any physical injury ever could. The alpha who'd claimed her as his mate 3 months ago under the full moon, who'd marked her throat with teeth that promised forever, who'd looked into her eyes and said she was his salvation. The same alpha who'd stood before his council this morning and declared her an enemy spy. A traitor. A threat to pack stability that needed to be eliminated. She hadn't even been allowed to speak in her own defense. The memory burned through her as she ran, Kieran's face carved from stone, his green eyes empty of everything except cold calculation. The council members surrounding her in a half-circle of judgment, their accusations flying like arrows. The evidence they'd presented, letters she'd never written, maps she'd never drawn, testimony from wolves she'd thought were friends. All of it fabricated. All of it pointing to one impossible conclusion, that she'd been sent by the Shadowcrest pack to infiltrate Blackthorn territory, to seduce their alpha, to destroy them from within. But it was the final accusation that had frozen her blood. The one that made everything else suddenly, horrifyingly make sense. They claimed she'd been sent to bear a cursed child. A weapon designed to tear Blackthorn apart. And the terrible truth was they were half right. Brielle crashed through a thicket of brambles, thorns tearing new wounds across her arms and face. She barely felt them. Her mind was racing faster than her feet, trying to piece together how everything had fallen apart so quickly. 6 weeks ago, she'd woken in Kieran's bed with the knowledge singing through her bones. She was carrying his child. The heir to Blackthorn. A child conceived in love, or what she'd foolishly believed was love. She'd planned to tell him that night. Had practiced the words 100 times, imagining his face transforming with joy. But before sunset, whispers had started circulating through the pack. Whispers about Shadowcrest movements on the border. About their alpha, Draven, making threats. about old prophecies and curses that tied bloodlines together in ways that could doom entire kingdoms. Then Kieran had started pulling away, stopped coming to their chambers, started looking at her with something that might have been suspicion or might have been fear. She couldn't tell which was worse. And this morning, she'd been dragged before the council to face charges that couldn't possibly be true, but somehow had evidence supporting every single one. Someone had orchestrated this. Someone had planted those letters, fabricated that testimony, built an entire case designed to make Kieran reject her, to make him order her death. But who? And why? The answer whispered at the edges of her consciousness, but she couldn't let herself think it through. Not while running for her life. Not while pregnant and bleeding and so terribly alone. A wolf burst through the trees to her right, a massive gray male she recognized as Corvin, one of Kieran's elite guards. His eyes gleamed with predatory satisfaction as he cut across her path, forcing her to veer left toward the rocky incline that marked the edge of Blackthorn territory. Toward the border she needed to cross, but might not survive reaching. Behind her, more wolves emerged from the darkness, their forms visible in brief lightning flashes. 8, 10, 12. More than enough to tear her apart even if she wasn't already wounded and exhausted. They were hurting her deliberately, she realized with sinking horror. Driving her toward the cliffs that overlooked the ravine separating Blackthorn land from Shadowcrest territory. They were going to force her to jump. Make her death look like an accident. A spy caught and choosing suicide over capture. Brielle's bare feet hit stone as the ground shifted from forest floor to rocky slope. The rain made every surface slick and deadly. She could hear the river now, the blood water that ran through the ravine, swollen with storm runoff and moving fast enough to smash a body against the rocks. Crossing it was suicide. But staying was certain death. She reached the cliff's edge and looked down. 60 feet of empty air between her and the churning water below. The opposite bank was shrouded in mist and darkness, but she knew what lay beyond it. Shadowcrest territory. Enemy land. The kingdom of Alpha Draven, who'd been at war with Kieran for 5 years over disputed borders and old blood debts. If she jumped and survived, she'd be jumping straight into the territory of an alpha who had every reason to kill her simply for being Kieran's mate. Or former mate. Or whatever she was now that he'd ordered her execution. But the child pulsing beneath her heart with that strange double rhythm that had been growing stronger each day. The child that somehow felt wrong in Blackthorn territory, like it didn't quite fit in the land of its father's kingdom. The child she'd do anything to protect, even if it meant throwing herself into the arms of an enemy alpha she'd never met. The wolves emerged from the tree line behind her, a semicircle of deadly intention, all teeth and muscle and absolute loyalty to their alpha's orders. Corvin stepped forward, his lips pulled back in what might have been a snarl or a smile. Nowhere left to run, traitor. His voice was rough, more growl than speech. The alpha showed you mercy by making it quick. Don't make us drag this out. Brielle backed up until her heels hung over empty air. The wind whipped her soaked hair across her face, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled like the drums of war. Her hand moved unconsciously to her stomach, not showing yet, but already everything. Already worth dying for. Already the only thing that mattered. I'm not a traitor, she said, and her voice came out stronger than she felt. I never was. But someone wanted Kieran to believe I was. Someone went through a lot of trouble to make sure he'd kill me. Corvin took another step forward. The other wolves moved with him, tightening the circle. Doesn't matter now. You're dead either way. Jump or we'll make you jump. Your choice. But it wasn't a choice. It was survival. It was the only path left when every other door had been slammed shut and barred from the inside. Brielle looked back one last time toward Blackthorn territory, toward the kingdom she'd thought would be her home, toward the alpha she'd loved who'd thrown her away like something contaminated, toward the life that had been ripped from her hands before she'd even fully grasped it. Then she turned back to the ravine, took a breath that tasted like rain and blood and something ancient stirring in her bones, and stepped backward into the void. The fall seemed to last forever and no time at all. Wind screamed past her ears. Lightning cracked again, illuminating her descent, a broken girl plummeting toward water that would either save her or smash her into oblivion. Her arms instinctively wrapped around her stomach, protecting the child even as gravity dragged them both down. The impact hit like a fist from the gods. Cold exploded through every nerve, driving the air from her lungs in a burst of bubbles. The current grabbed her immediately, dragging her under and downstream with terrifying force. She couldn't tell which way was up. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't think through the cold and the panic and the absolute certainty that she was drowning. Her shoulder slammed into a submerged rock, sending fresh agony through already damaged tissue. Then her hip caught another. The river was trying to kill her, battering her against stones hidden just beneath the surface. Her lungs burned for air. Her vision started to dim at the edges. But somewhere inside, deeper than thought or fear, something else woke up. That wrongness she'd been feeling for weeks, that sense of not fitting in Kieran's territory, suddenly shifted. Became something else. Something that felt almost like recognition. The child's heartbeat changed, grew stronger. And impossibly, Brielle felt power surge through her veins like liquid fire, warming her from the inside out even as the freezing water tried to drag her down. Her hand moved without conscious thought, and silver light, faint but unmistakable, flickered between her fingers for just a moment before vanishing. What was that? She didn't have time to process it. The current suddenly shifted, carrying her toward the opposite bank with force that seemed almost intentional. Her hand caught an exposed root just as her head broke the surface, and she gasped air into starving lungs. Everything hurt. Everything was cold. But she was alive. Brielle dragged herself onto the muddy shore with the last reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed. Collapsed face down on ground that smelled different from Blackthorn territory, darker somehow, older, carrying scents of pine and stone, and something wild that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up even through her exhaustion. She'd made it across. She was in Shadowcrest land now. Enemy territory. The kingdom of Alpha Draven. And she had no idea if she'd just escaped one death only to run straight into another. Thunder rolled overhead again, but softer now, as if the storm was finally passing. Rain continued to fall, but gentler, washing the blood from her wounds and mixing with tears she didn't remember starting to cry. She should move. Should hide. Should do something other than lie here in the open where any Shadowcrest patrol could find her. But her body had given everything it had. There was nothing left. So she lay there on the bank of the blood water, in enemy territory, carrying the secret child of an alpha who'd ordered her death, and waited to see which would claim her first: exhaustion, exposure, or the wolves of Shadowcrest. And as consciousness started to slip away, one final thought drifted through her mind like smoke. The child's heartbeat had changed the moment she crossed into this territory. Changed and strengthened. As if somehow, impossibly, it belonged here more than it had ever belonged in the land of its father's kingdom. What did that mean? But darkness was pulling her under before she could begin to find an answer, and the last thing she felt was the strange warmth still pulsing from her core. The child, awake and aware in ways no unborn infant should be, responding to this enemy land like it had finally come home. Consciousness returned in fragments, pain first, sharp and insistent in her shoulder, then cold seeping through every layer of skin and muscle, then the disorienting awareness that she was moving without moving her own limbs. Being carried. Strong arms beneath her knees and shoulders, a chest solid as stone pressed against her side, and a scent that made every instinct she possessed scream contradictory commands. Run. Stay. Danger. Safety. Brielle's eyes opened to darkness broken by torchlight. Stone walls curved overhead, a tunnel of some kind, ancient and dripping with moisture. The arms holding her didn't falter at her stirring, didn't adjust their grip. Whoever carried her moved with the fluid confidence of someone who knew these passages intimately, who didn't need to watch where his feet fell. His. Definitely male. The scent told her that much: pine and smoke and something darker, like iron left in rain. Alpha. The power radiating from him was unmistakable, pressing against her senses like a physical weight. You're awake. The voice came from above her, deep and rough-edged, carrying an accent she didn't recognize. Not Blackthorn's clipped formality. Something older, shaped by different mountains. Good. Means you're stronger than you look. She tried to speak, but her throat closed around the words. Her body went rigid in his arms, every muscle locking down in preparation for fight or flight, neither of which she was capable of in her current state. Easy. The command was soft, but absolute. You jumped off a cliff into the bloodwater during a storm. Your body's been through hell. Don't make it worse by panicking now. Brielle forced her eyes to focus on the face above her. Sharp features carved from shadow and torchlight, strong jaw, straight nose, dark hair pulled back from a face that would have been beautiful if it wasn't so severe. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. Gold. Pure molten gold, reflecting the firelight like a predator's eyes catching moonlight. Ancient eyes. Eyes that had seen too much and felt too little and were currently studying her with an intensity that made her feel transparent. Draven. His name escaped her lips before she could stop it, barely a whisper, but loud enough in the echoing tunnel. One dark eyebrow lifted. You know me? Interesting. Most wolves from Blackthorn territory would rather die than speak my name. His grip on her shifted slightly, pulling her more securely against his chest as he navigated a turn in the passage. Yet here you are, half dead on my riverbank, smelling like Kieran's territory and his scent mark. Tell me, little wolf, should I finish what the bloodwater started, or are you worth the trouble of keeping alive? The casual way he spoke about her death should have terrified her. Instead, something else entirely moved through her chest, a flutter that wasn't fear, wasn't quite recognition, but felt disturbingly close to both. The child. The child was reacting to his proximity with that same strange warmth she'd felt when crossing into Shadowcrest territory. Why? Why would her child, Kieran's child, respond to his enemy's presence like this? I'm not. She had to stop, swallow against the rawness in her throat. I'm not a threat to you. Everyone's a threat until proven otherwise. But there was something in his tone that suggested he didn't entirely believe his own words. You jumped into the bloodwater rather than face whatever was chasing you on the Blackthorn side. That speaks to serious motivation, desperation, or guilt. They emerged from the tunnel into a vast cavern lit by dozens of torches mounted on the walls. The space opened up around them like a cathedral carved from living rock, stalactites hanging from a ceiling lost in shadow, a natural pool of still water in the center reflecting the firelight like liquid gold. And everywhere, carved into the stone itself, symbols she didn't recognize. Ancient writing. Pack marks that predated any kingdom she knew. Other wolves moved through the space, guards, she realized, all wearing the same dark leather that marked them as Shadowcrest warriors. All of them stopped what they were doing to watch their alpha carry a bleeding stranger through their sanctuary. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to hostility, but none of them questioned. None of them moved to interfere. Whatever Draven wanted, Draven got. The power dynamic was that simple and that absolute. He carried her to a raised platform on the far side of the cavern, where furs and blankets had been arranged into something resembling a bed. Set her down with surprising gentleness, though his hands lingered perhaps a moment longer than necessary before withdrawing. Then he stepped back, arms crossing over his chest, and simply watched her with those unsettling golden eyes. You were on my land when my patrol found you. His voice filled the cavern despite not being raised. Unconscious, bleeding, wearing Kieran's mark on your throat, but smelling like terror and betrayal. The storm had passed, but you'd been in that river long enough to drown 3 times over. Yet somehow you survived. He tilted his head, studying her. Why? Brielle's hand moved instinctively to her stomach, then caught herself, forced her arm back to her side. But Draven's eyes had already tracked the movement, and something shifted in his expression, not quite understanding, but close. Dangerously close. I'm not his spy, she said, and the words came out stronger than she felt. Whatever you think I am, whatever you assume about why I'm here, you're wrong. Am I? He moved closer, crouching down so they were eye level. This close, she could see the scars that marked his throat, old wounds from battles she could only imagine. Could see the way his jaw tightened, the way his nostrils flared slightly as he scented her more carefully. You smell like Blackthorn territory. Like Kieran's chambers. Like you've been living among my enemies for months, maybe years. And yet here you are, running for your life in the middle of the night. So either you betrayed him, or he betrayed you. Which is it? The question hung in the air between them, sharp as any blade. Brielle met his gaze and saw no mercy there, no softness that she could appeal to. Just cold calculation and a predator's patience. He would wait for her answer. Would evaluate every word, every micro-expression, every shift in her scent. And based on what he found, he would decide whether she lived or died. The truth felt impossible on her tongue. How could she explain what she herself didn't fully understand? That Kieran had turned on her based on fabricated evidence. That someone had orchestrated her downfall with meticulous precision. That she carried a child who seemed to respond to Shadowcrest territory in ways that violated everything she knew about pack bonds and bloodlines. But lying to an alpha with eyes like molten gold felt even more impossible. He believed I was a traitor, she said finally. Someone planted evidence. Letters I never wrote. Testimony from wolves I thought were friends. By the time I was dragged before his council this morning, he'd already decided I was guilty. Already ordered my execution. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she hated herself for the weakness. So I ran. And when running wasn't enough, I jumped. Because dying in the river felt like better odds than dying by his command. Silence stretched between them. Draven's expression didn't change, but something in his scent shifted, a subtle warming, like banked coals stirring to life. Kieran sentenced you to death. Not a question. A statement, filed away for consideration. And you expect me to believe you're innocent? That Blackthorn's golden alpha would execute his own mate without cause. The mockery in his tone when he said golden alpha was unmistakable. Old hatred there. Old wounds. Whatever existed between these two alphas went deeper than border disputes. I don't expect you to believe anything, Brielle said. I don't expect mercy. I don't expect protection. I know exactly where I am and who you are. I know you have every reason to kill me just for existing. But I'm telling you the truth anyway because... She stopped, the words tangling on her tongue. Because why? Because some instinct she didn't understand told her this male could be trusted even when logic screamed otherwise? Because you have nowhere else to go. Draven finished for her, his voice gone soft and dangerous. Because you're injured and alone and carrying. He paused, his eyes dropping to her stomach for just a moment before returning to her face. Carrying something you don't want me to know about. Ice flooded her veins. He knew. Somehow he knew. I don't, she started, but he raised one hand, cutting her off. Don't insult either of us by lying. I can smell it on you. Faint, but there. The shift in hormones. The slight sweetness beneath the blood and fear. His head tilted again, wolf studying prey. You're pregnant. Not far along, but far enough. And based on your reaction, I'm guessing Kieran didn't know before he ordered your death. Which raises an interesting question. He leaned in closer, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his skin despite the cavern's chill. Could see the flecks of amber in those gold eyes, could count the individual scars on his throat if she'd been brave enough to look. Were you planning to tell him? Draven's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Or were you running because you knew that child would complicate everything? The answer stuck in her throat. Because the truth was, she didn't know. Had planned to tell Kieran, yes. But then everything had fallen apart so quickly, and the child had started feeling wrong in Blackthorn territory, and now she was here, in enemy land, with that wrongness replaced by something that felt disturbingly like rightness. It's his child, she said, because that much was simple. That much was fact. Whatever you're thinking, whatever you're planning, the child I carry is Kieran's heir. That's the only truth that matters. Something flashed across Draven's face, too quick to read, but there. Gone before she could interpret it. He pushed his feet, putting distance between them again, and when he spoke, his voice had gone neutral. Carefully, deliberately neutral. The only truth that matters, he repeated, almost to himself. Then louder, you're carrying Blackthorn's heir. In my territory. After jumping off a cliff to escape execution. And you expect me to, what? Send you back? Keep you prisoner? Welcome you with open arms. I expect you to do whatever serves your interests, Brielle said, and somehow managed to keep her voice steady. I'm not naive enough to think otherwise. But before you decide what those interests are, you should know one thing. And what's that? She pushed herself up on her elbows despite the pain screaming through her shoulder. Met his eyes directly, Wolf to Alpha, and let him see the steel beneath her exhaustion. Someone orchestrated my downfall. Someone went through enormous effort to turn Kieran against me, to fabricate evidence, to make him believe I was your spy. Which means someone wanted me dead, or wanted me driven out, or wanted. She trailed off, the implications suddenly hitting her with devastating force. Wanted me here. In your territory. Draven's eyes narrowed. Explain. Think about it. Whoever planted that evidence knew Kieran well enough to know exactly what accusations would make him turn on me. Knew the timing. Knew how to present it to his council for maximum impact. That kind of manipulation requires inside knowledge of Blackthorn's power structure. Her mind was racing now, pieces falling into place like a puzzle she hadn't realized she was solving. But it also requires knowing I'd run towards Shadowcrest territory when the alternative was execution. Requires knowing I'd survive the Bloodwater. Requires. She stopped, the next thought too terrible to voice. But Draven was already ahead of her, his expression gone dark. Requires knowing you're pregnant, he said quietly. Requires knowing that Blackthorn's heir would survive that jump when you shouldn't have. His jaw clenched. Someone wanted you here. In my land. Carrying Kieran's child. Which means this isn't about you at all, little wolf. This is about starting a war neither of us can walk away from. The cavern suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. Because he was right. God's help her, he was right. Everything that had happened, the timing, the accusations, the escape that should have killed her but didn't, it had all been orchestrated to bring her here. To place Blackthorn's pregnant mate on Shadowcrest land. To create a situation where violence was inevitable and peace impossible. Someone wanted these two alphas to destroy each other. And they'd used her as the match to light the fuse. So what now? Her voice came out smaller than she intended. You kill me and prove them right? Keep me prisoner and give them their war? Send me back and let Kieran finish what he started. Draven was quiet for a long moment, those gold eyes studying her with an intensity that felt like being dissected. Then, unexpectedly, one corner of his mouth lifted in something that wasn't quite a smile. Now, he said, I do the one thing whoever orchestrated this didn't plan for. He gestured to one of his guards, a tall female with silver hair and scars crossing her face. Talia. Get the healer. Have her treat this one's wounds. Food, water, clean clothes. She stays in the sanctuary until I decide what to do with her. Alpha, Talia's protest was immediate. That's an order. His voice cracked like a whip, brooking no argument. Talia bowed her head in submission and moved to obey. Draven turned back to Brielle, and this time there was definitely something almost like amusement in his eyes. You're going to live, little wolf. At least for now. Because whoever wanted you here, wanted you desperate and afraid and easy to control. So instead, I'm going to keep you safe. Feed you. Heal you. Let you rest. He crouched down again, close enough that she could see her own reflection in his eyes, small, bedraggled, still bleeding from a dozen wounds. And then he continued softly, You're going to tell me everything. Every detail about Blackthorn's defenses, his council's weaknesses, his alliances. Every secret Kieran ever whispered to you in the dark. Because if someone wants war badly enough to orchestrate all this, then war is coming whether we like it or not. And I intend to win. His hand moved almost gently to brush a strand of wet hair from her face, a gesture that should have been tender, but somehow felt more like claiming. "Welcome to Shadowcrest, Brielle." His smile widened, showing teeth. "I have a feeling you're going to be here a very long time." Then he was gone, striding away across the cavern with his guards falling into formation around him, leaving her alone on the platform with the echo of her own name still ringing in her ears. He'd known her name. He'd known it without her ever speaking it, which meant he'd been watching her. Knew who she was before his patrol ever found her on that riverbank. How long had he been watching? And more terrifying, what else did he know that he hadn't yet revealed? The healer arrived, an elderly woman with kind eyes and steady hands who began cleaning Brielle's wounds without asking questions. And as the pain slowly faded beneath the healer's ministrations, as warmth gradually returned to her frozen limbs, Brielle found herself staring at the archway where Draven had disappeared. The Alpha who should have been her enemy. The Alpha whose territory made her unborn child pulse with inexplicable recognition. The Alpha who just promised to keep her safe while simultaneously demanding she betray everything she'd ever known. And the most terrifying part wasn't that he expected betrayal. It was that some small, treacherous part of her was already considering it. Because Kieran had thrown her away. Had believed lies over love. Had ordered her death without even granting her a chance to defend herself. But Draven enemy, stranger, predator, had pulled her from the river. Had carried her to safety. Had looked at her like she was a puzzle worth solving rather than a problem to eliminate. Which of them was truly the monster in this story? The question haunted her as exhaustion finally pulled her under, as the healer's gentle hands wrapped bandages around wounds that would scar but would heal. And in her dreams, she heard Draven's voice again, soft and dangerous. "Welcome to Shadowcrest." As if she'd had any choice. As if fate hadn't already decided exactly where she belonged. And the child in her womb pulsed with warmth, responding to the stone around them, to the territory they'd entered, to something ancient and inevitable that was only just beginning to wake. Sleep brought no mercy, only memories. Brielle drifted through fevered dreams where past and present tangled into something grotesque and inescapable. Kieran's face as he looked at her 3 months ago under the mating moon, eyes full of wonder and promise. Overlaid with his expression this morning in the council chamber, carved from ice and devoid of recognition. As if she'd never been anything more than a stranger. A threat. Something to be eliminated. The healer's touch pulled her back to consciousness periodically, cool cloths on her forehead, bitter tea forced between her lips, soft words in a language she didn't recognize. But each time she surfaced, the memories dragged her back under like riptides. Back to the beginning. Back to the moment everything had started to go wrong, though she hadn't known it then. Back to the night she'd first revealed what she truly was. 4 months ago. The eastern border of Blackthorn territory. A hunting expedition gone wrong. She could still feel the snow beneath her feet, remember the way the winter moon had turned the forest into something crystalline and otherworldly. Kieran beside her, his hand warm in hers despite the cold, his voice slow as he told her stories about his childhood in these woods. About the mother he'd lost to a border skirmish when he was 12. About the weight of the Alpha title he'd inherited too young from a father who died believing peace was weakness. They'd been happy. Gods, they'd been so foolishly, perfectly happy. Then the rogues had attacked. 6 of them, emerging from the trees like shadows given teeth and claws. Exiled wolves with nothing to lose, desperate enough to strike at an Alpha on his own territory. They'd gone for Kieran first, the prize, the kill that would make their names legendary among the lawless. And Kieran had fought like the warrior he was, taking down 2 before the others swarmed him. Brielle had watched him go down beneath their combined weight. Had seen blood splash across pristine snow. Had felt something inside her chest crack open like a door she'd kept locked for 23 years. And then there was only silver fire. It had erupted from her skin without thought, without control, flames that burned cold instead of hot, that consumed flesh, but left trees and snow untouched. The rogues had screamed. Had tried to run. But the fire had chased them down with predatory intelligence, wrapping around throats and seeping into mouths until their screams cut off into silence. When it was over, 6 bodies lay charred beyond recognition in the snow. And Brielle had stood in the center of them, her hands still crackling with dying embers of silver light, her entire body shaking with the aftermath of power she'd never meant to unleash. Kieran had stared at her. Just stared. Blood running down his face from a gash above his eye, his breathing ragged, his expression impossible to read. "What are you?" The question had been barely a whisper. And she'd told him. Finally, after 3 years of hiding, of pretending to be nothing more than an ordinary wolf who'd wandered into his territory seeking sanctuary. She'd told him the truth she'd been running from since she was old enough to understand what it meant. Silvermoon bloodline. The words had tasted like ash. The last one, as far as I know. My mother was executed when I was 7. My father disappeared before I was born. The pack that raised me, they were terrified of what I might become. What I might do if I ever lost control. She looked at her hands, still faintly glowing. So I learned to never lose control. Learned to bury it so deep I could almost pretend it didn't exist. Silvermoon. Kieran had said the word like he was tasting something ancient and dangerous. The fire-blessed line. The ones who could burn through pack bonds, who could challenge alpha commands, who, he'd stopped, his eyes widening. The stories say Silvermoon wolves were exterminated 2 generations ago. Hunted down because their power made them too dangerous to control. Most of them were. Brielle had wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly freezing despite the fire still simmering beneath her skin. My mother survived by hiding what she was. Made it a wolf from a different bloodline, hoping I'd be born normal. But the gift doesn't die just because you wish it would. It waits. It watches. And the moment you care enough about something to fight for it. She gestured to the bodies. This is what happens. Kieran had been quiet for a long time. Long enough that fear had started crawling up her spine. Long enough that she'd begun calculating how fast she could run, how far she might get before his pack caught her. Then he'd closed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms. "You saved my life." His voice had been rough, muffled against her hair. "You revealed your greatest secret to protect me. Do you have any idea what that means?" She'd shaken her head, not trusting her voice. "It means you're mine." He'd pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "It means I don't care what bloodline you come from or what power burns in your veins. It means I'm keeping you, Brielle. And anyone who tries to take you from me will learn exactly why they call me Blackthorn's Wolf King." He'd kissed her then, and she'd tasted blood and promise, and something she'd been foolish enough to believe was forever. 2 weeks later, he'd claimed her as his mate under the full moon. Had marked her throat before his entire pack, declaring her his equal and his chosen. Had taken her to his bed and whispered against her skin that her power made her perfect, made her strong enough to stand beside an alpha without breaking. She'd believed him. Had let herself believe that maybe, finally, she'd found a place where her cursed bloodline didn't matter, where she could be more than the monster her first pack had feared. What an idiot she'd been. The memory released her back into darkness, but consciousness was closer now. She could feel the actual cavern around her, the stone beneath the firs, the warmth of banked fires, the steady drip of water somewhere in the distance. Could hear voices speaking in low tones nearby. Dangerous keeping her here. If Kieran discovers. Kieran threw her to the wolves. Literally. Draven's voice unmistakable even at a murmur. What he discovers is irrelevant. She's carrying his heir. A different voice, male, younger. That makes her a weapon we can't afford to ignore. Or it makes her a shield. Draven again, and something in his tone made Brielle's breath catch. Think it through, Stellan. Kieran executed his own mate based on fabricated evidence. When word of that spreads, and it will spread, how do you think his allies will react? How will the other packs view an alpha who kills his pregnant mate without trial? Silence. Then, you're going to use her to destroy his reputation. I'm going to use the truth to show the kingdoms what Kieran really is beneath all that golden armor. A pause. And if she's valuable enough alive, she becomes untouchable. Kill her, and I'm the monster who murdered a pregnant refugee. Protect her, and I'm the merciful alpha who offered sanctuary when her own mate tried to execute her. This is dangerous, Alpha. She's Silver Moon bloodline. The reports from our spies. I know what she is. Draven's voice went sharp. I've known since the night she burned those rogues on Kieran's border. Did you really think I wouldn't have eyes in Blackthorn territory? That I wouldn't investigate the moment I heard whispers about Silver Fire and a mate who appeared from nowhere? Brielle's heart slammed against her ribs. He'd known. For months, he'd known what she was. Had been watching her since that night in the snow. Then you know how dangerous she could be if she turns that power against us. She won't. Draven sounded absolutely certain. Because Silver Moon wolves don't bond to territory, they bond to purpose. To protection. Right now, the only thing she cares about is that child. Which means as long as I keep the child safe, she'll do whatever I ask. The casual manipulation in his words should have terrified her. Instead, all she felt was a cold sort of clarity. At least he was honest about it. At least he wasn't pretending this was about mercy or kindness or anything beyond pure strategic calculation. Unlike Kieran, who'd whispered love while planning her destruction. And if the child is born? Stellan pressed. If Blackthorn's heir grows up in Shadowcrest territory, then we'll have leverage Kieran can never overcome. His own bloodline, raised among his enemies, learning to call Shadowcrest home. Draven's voice dropped lower, darker. Justice for every wolf his father killed in the border wars. For every life Kieran himself has taken to expand his precious kingdom. Footsteps moved away, voices fading into the cavern's depths. Brielle lay perfectly still, processing what she'd overheard. Draven intended to use her child as a weapon. As leverage. As a tool to destroy Kieran from within. She should have been horrified. Should have been planning escape, plotting how to get back across the Bloodwater and warn Kieran despite everything. But all she could think was, he's going to keep us safe. He's going to protect the baby. And wasn't that the most damning thing? That she cared more about her child's survival than about loyalty to an alpha who'd already proven his loyalty had limits. Who'd chosen his kingdom over her without hesitation. The healer's hands returned, checking bandages, adjusting furs. You're awake, the old woman said softly. I can tell by your breathing. Have been for the last few minutes. No point in pretending otherwise. Brielle opened her eyes to find the healer, Mira. She'd introduced herself as earlier, sitting beside the platform, her weathered face kind but knowing. You heard. Not a question. I heard. Mira nodded slowly. And now you're wondering if you jumped from one monster into the arms of another. I'm wondering if there's any difference. Brielle's voice came out hoarse, raw. Kieran wanted me dead. Draven wants me alive, but only as a tool. Neither of them actually sees me as a person. Just as something to be used. Maybe. Myra's hands moved to prepare more tea, the scent sharp and medicinal. Or maybe you're not seeing clearly yet. Grief and betrayal cloud judgment. Make everything look like threat. He said it himself. He's keeping me alive to use my child against Kieran. He's keeping you alive because killing you serves no purpose. Mira pressed the cup into Brielle's hands. Drink. And listen to an old wolf who's seen too many alphas come and go in her lifetime. She waited until Brielle had taken a sip before continuing. Draven is calculating. Strategic. Some would call him cold. But he's not cruel. If he wanted to hurt you, you'd know it. If he intended to use you the way you fear, he wouldn't have had me heal your wounds or provide comfort. He'd have thrown you in a cell and let you suffer. So I should be grateful for basic decency? You should be smart enough to see the difference between an alpha who protects what's his and an alpha who destroys what threatens him. Myra's eyes, still sharp despite her age, studied Brielle carefully. Kieran chose destruction the moment things became complicated. Draven chose protection. Draw your own conclusions about which one is the monster. The tea was bitter, but warmth spread through Brielle's chest as she drank. The healer was right, even if admitting it felt like betrayal. Kieran had had options. Could have investigated the accusations against her. Could have given her a chance to defend herself. Could have at least hesitated before ordering her death. He'd done none of those things. I loved him. The words escaped before she could stop them. 3 years, and I actually believed he loved me back. How stupid was I? Not stupid. Human. Myra's hand patted her arm gently. We all want to believe the best of those we love. Doesn't make you weak. Makes you capable of hope, which, in a world like ours, might be the rarest gift of all. Brielle finished the tea and handed the cup back, her thoughts churning. The child pulsed beneath her heart, that strange double rhythm she still didn't understand. And for the first time since discovering the pregnancy, she let herself really examine what she was feeling from the life growing inside her. Not just warmth, not just recognition, but something almost like eagerness. As if the child was happy here. Content in Shadowcrest territory in ways it had never been in Blackthorn lands. Mira? She kept her voice low. Have you ever heard of a child responding to territory that isn't its father's? The healer went very still. What do you mean? The baby. Ever since I crossed into Shadowcrest land, it's been different. Stronger. Like it. She struggled for words. Like it fits here. Like this is where it's supposed to be. Myra's expression shifted through several emotions too quickly to track: surprise, concern, and something that might have been dawning comprehension. How far along are you? 6 weeks. Maybe 7. And you were mated to Kieran 3 months ago? Yes. The healer's hands trembled slightly as she set down the cup. Child, I need you to think very carefully. Before Kieran, was there anyone else? Even briefly? Even just once? No. There's been no one else since I came to Blackthorn territory 3 years ago. Kieran is the only. She stopped, confusion giving way to something colder. Why are you asking this? Mira stood, her movements suddenly urgent. I need to speak with the Alpha. Now. Don't move. Don't leave this platform. And for the love of the old gods, don't let anyone else know about what you just told me. Wait, what's wrong? What does it mean? But the healer was already gone, hurrying across the cavern with her robes flapping behind her like wings, leaving Brielle alone with her questions and the child pulsing beneath her heart and a growing sense that something impossible was happening. Something that violated every rule she knew about pack bonds and bloodlines and how wolves were supposed to work. A child should respond to its father's territory, should feel most at home in the land of its alpha parent. That was biology. That was the foundation of every pack structure that had existed since wolves first learned to shift. But her child felt wrong in Kieran's lands and right in Draven's, which meant either the bond between father and child was broken, or Kieran wasn't the father at all. But that was impossible. She'd been with no one else, had been faithful to him from the moment they'd met. There was no other explanation. Unless a memory surfaced, hazy and incomplete. The night of the mating ceremony. She'd drunk the ritual wine, felt it burn through her system like liquid fire. Had chalked up the disorientation to nerves and ceremony and the overwhelming emotion of being claimed by an alpha. But there'd been gaps in that night. Hours she couldn't quite account for between the public ceremony and waking in Kieran's bed. She'd thought it was just the wine. The exhaustion. The intensity of the mate bond snapping into place. But what if it wasn't? What if someone had drugged that wine with something stronger than alcohol? What if those missing hours contained something she couldn't remember? Someone she couldn't remember? No, that was insane. Paranoid. She would have known. Would have felt violated. Would have. But would she? If the drug had been strong enough to erase memory, would she have any way of knowing? The cavern suddenly felt too small, the stone walls pressing in like a tomb. Brielle pushed herself upright despite the pain screaming through her shoulder, despite Myra's warning to stay still. She needed air. Needed space. Needed to think without the weight of stone and torchlight and impossible implications crushing down on her. She made it 3 steps before her legs gave out. Strong hands caught her before she hit the ground, not Myra's gentle grip, but something larger, more powerful. The scent hit her a moment later, pine and smoke and iron. Draven. I told Mira to keep you in bed. His voice was stern, but his hands were careful as he lifted her, carrying her back to the platform. You've lost too much blood to be walking around. Put me down. She tried to sound commanding and achieved only weak defiance. No. He set her on the furs anyway, but didn't immediately step back. Those gold eyes studied her face, reading things she didn't want him to see. What did you tell my healer that had her running to find me like the caverns were on fire? Brielle looked away, unable to hold his gaze. Nothing. Try again. It's none of your concern. Everything about you is my concern now. His hand caught her chin, gentle but firm, turning her face back toward his. You're in my territory, under my protection, carrying a child that might be the key to ending a 5-year war. So whatever revelation just turned you pale as death, that absolutely is my concern. She wanted to resist. Wanted to keep the secret locked behind her teeth. But exhaustion and fear and the sheer weight of everything that had happened in the last 24 hours finally broke through her defenses. The child responds to your territory, she whispered. Not Kieran's. Yours. And I don't know why, but Mira seemed to think it meant something. Something important. Draven went utterly still. His hand dropped from her chin, and for a moment, his expression was completely unreadable. Then something shifted, a crack in the Alpha's armor, revealing shock and comprehension, and something that looked disturbingly like recognition. Say that again. His voice had gone quiet. Dangerous. The baby. It's been stronger, more active, since I crossed into Shadowcrest lands. In Blackthorn territory, it felt wrong. Like it didn't fit. But here, she pressed her hand to her stomach, feeling that steady pulse. Here it feels right. And I know that's impossible. I know it doesn't make sense. But it's true. Draven turned away from her, his shoulders tight with tension. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. Too controlled. How many times did you see Kieran in the week before your mating ceremony? The questions seemed to come from nowhere. What? Answer the question. She thought back, trying to remember through the haze of 3 months past. Twice, maybe? He was dealing with border tensions. Preparing for the ceremony. We had dinner together 2 nights before, and then I didn't see him again until the ceremony itself. And the ceremony. Did you drink the ritual wine? Of course. It's required. She stopped, her blood going cold. Why are you asking about the wine? Draven's jaw clenched. Because if someone wanted to ensure a specific outcome, the ritual wine would be the perfect delivery method. Sacred. Unquestioned. Consumed by both parties before the mating bond is sealed. I don't understand. He turned back to her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. Not anger. Not calculation. But something raw and unguarded that she'd never expected to see on the face of an alpha known for his cold control. 3 months ago, I received intelligence that Kieran was planning a mating ceremony. That he'd chosen you. I sent someone to observe. To confirm. His hands curled into fists at his sides. That observer never reported back. Was found dead 3 days later on the border. And I never discovered why. What does that have to do with everything? He moved closer, crouching down so they were eye level again. Because the night of your ceremony, I was contacted by someone claiming to have information about a plot against both our kingdoms. Information that required an in-person meeting. In neutral territory. His expression twisted. I went. And I woke up 12 hours later with no memory of what happened after I arrived at the meeting point. The cavern tilted. Or maybe that was just her world turning inside out. You're saying. She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't make her mind wrap around the implications. I'm saying someone drugged both of us the same night. Erased our memories. And now you're carrying a child that responds to my territory instead of Kieran's. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I'm saying that child might not be his heir at all. The words hung in the air between them, impossible and terrifying and somehow, inexplicably, feeling true. But I have no memory, Brielle said. No memory of anything except Kieran. The ceremony. Waking up marked as his mate. Neither do I. Draven's hand moved, hovering near her face, but not quite touching. But Silvermoon bloodlines bond differently than other wolves. They don't respond to mate marks or alpha commands. They respond to bloodline recognition, to genetic compatibility. His eyes searched hers. And if that child is mine, if someone orchestrated this, then everything that's happened, your exile, the accusations, your flight to my territory, it's all part of a plan we're only beginning to understand. Brielle's hand pressed against her stomach, feeling the pulse of life that had seemed wrong in one kingdom and right in another. Feeling the truth settling into her bones like ice. Someone had stolen a night from both of them. Had manipulated bloodlines and bonds and fate itself. Had created a child that could be a bridge between kingdoms or a weapon to destroy them both. And now that child was awake in her womb, pulsing with recognition for an alpha who might be its true father. Growing stronger in territory that called to blood no one had intended to mix. What do we do? The question came out broken. Draven's hand finally completed its journey, cupping her face with surprising tenderness. We find out the truth. We discover who did this and why. And we protect that child, whatever it takes, whoever its father truly is. Because innocent life doesn't deserve to be a pawn in someone else's war. His thumb brushed across her cheek, and she realized she was crying. When had she started crying? I can't lose this baby. Her voice cracked. It's the only thing I have left. You won't. The promise in his voice was absolute. On my life, on my kingdom, on everything I am, I will keep you both safe. No matter what we discover. No matter what comes. And looking into those gold eyes, feeling the steadiness of his presence, Brielle found herself believing him, which made him either her salvation or the most dangerous wolf she'd ever met. Possibly both. 3 days passed in a blur of healing and revelation. Mira conducted tests, ancient ones, involving herbs and blood and rituals Brielle had never seen before. Draven brought scholars from the depths of Shadowcrest territory, elderly wolves who spoke in reverent whispers about bloodline magic and forgotten prophecies. And through it all, Brielle felt the child growing stronger, its heartbeat synchronizing with something vast and old that seemed to pulse through the very stones of the cavern. On the 4th morning, Draven came to her with an expression that told her everything had changed. Get dressed. He set a bundle of clothes on the platform beside her, dark leather pants, a soft tunic, boots that looked like they'd fit. There's something you need to see. What is it? Something that's been hidden for 200 years. Something that might explain everything. His eyes met hers, and she saw urgency there beneath the control. The scholars found a reference in the old texts. A prophecy about Silvermoon bloodline and the joining of enemy kingdoms. About a child born of silver fire and shadow. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach. Silver fire and shadow. Silvermoon and Shadowcrest. Exactly. He turned away, giving her privacy to dress. Get ready. We have a journey to make. 20 minutes later, Brielle found herself being led deeper into the mountain than she'd known existed. The main cavern gave way to narrow passages that twisted and descended, lit only by torches Draven carried. The air grew colder, heavier, thick with the weight of centuries and stone. Other wolves accompanied them, Talia, the silver-haired guard, Stellan, who she learned was Draven's second, and Mira, moving with surprising agility for her age. No one spoke. The only sounds were their footsteps echoing off ancient rock and the occasional drip of water from somewhere in the darkness above. They walked for what felt like hours, going so deep Brielle lost all sense of direction. Just when her legs began to shake with exhaustion, the passage opened into a chamber that stole the breath from her lungs. It was massive, larger than the main cavern, larger than any space she'd seen carved from natural stone. The ceiling soared upward into shadow, supported by columns that looked simultaneously natural and deliberately shaped, as if the mountain itself had been convinced to hold this space open. But it was the walls that made her stagger. Every surface was covered in carvings. Not the crude scratchings of primitive wolves, but intricate, flowing art that seemed to move in the torchlight. Images of wolves running beneath full moons. Flames rendered in such detail she could almost feel their heat. And everywhere, woven through every scene, symbols that glowed faintly silver when the light hit them just right. Silver moon marks. Hundreds of them. Thousands. A written history in a language she'd never been taught but somehow, impossibly, could almost read. What is this place? Her voice echoed, coming back to her layered and strange. The first temple. Mira stepped forward, her weathered face transformed by wonder and reverence. Before there were territories or pack kingdoms. Before wolves divided into factions that warred over borders. This is where our ancestors gathered. Where silver moon wolves led rituals that bound the entire wolf nation together. I thought silver moon bloodline was exterminated 2 generations ago. They were. Draven moved to stand beside a particular section of wall where the carvings seemed denser, more urgent. But before that, they were something else. They were mediators. Bridge builders. The only wolves whose power transcended pack bonds and alpha commands. When disputes arose between territories, silver moon wolves were the arbiters. Their judgment was considered sacred. Unquestionable. His hand traced one of the glowing symbols. Until one of them made a judgment that certain alphas didn't like. Until their power became inconvenient to wolves who wanted to consolidate control rather than maintain balance. So they were hunted down. Brielle moved closer to the wall, her eyes following the flow of images. She could see it now, the story carved in stone. Silver moon wolves gathering in this very chamber. Fire rising from their hands as they settled disputes, healed bonds, brought peace. And then the images shifted, grew darker. Wolves attacking. Silver fire extinguished. Bodies falling. They were slaughtered because they wouldn't let certain alphas have unchecked power. Every last one. Myra's voice carried old grief. Or so everyone believed. But your mother survived. Hid what she was. Passed the bloodline to you. And now, she gestured to Brielle's stomach. Now the fire is being passed again. Stronger than before. Because it's been joined with something it was never meant to touch. Shadow Crest bloodline. Stellan spoke for the first time, his young face serious. Pure shadow magic. The opposite of silver fire in every way. One creates bonds, the other severs them. One heals, the other destroys. They're not supposed to mix. But they did. Draven's voice was quiet. 3 months ago, somehow, they did. Which means either it was accident, he paused, his jaw tight. Or someone engineered it deliberately. Why? Brielle turned to face him. If these bloodlines aren't supposed to mix, if it goes against everything natural, why would anyone want to create this child? Draven didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestured to Talia, who stepped forward carrying a leather-bound book that looked ancient enough to crumble at a touch. The guard opened it carefully, revealing pages covered in that same flowing script that decorated the walls. She found a specific passage, marked with a strip of faded cloth, and began to read. When silver fire burns in Shadow's heart, when enemy blood flows as one, the child of 2 kingdoms shall wake the old power sleeping beneath sacred stone. In their hands, the choice, unite what was broken or shatter what remains. Talia's voice carried through the chamber, and the symbols on the walls seemed to pulse brighter with each word. Born of betrayal, but blessed by fate, they shall walk between worlds, belonging to neither, needed by both. And in the hour of greatest darkness, they alone will stand at the threshold, deciding whether wolves survive as nation or fall as fragments scattered to ash. Silence fell, heavy and absolute. Brielle felt the words sink into her bones, felt the child respond with a surge of warmth that was almost painful in its intensity. A prophecy. Her voice came out flat, empty. You're saying this child is part of a prophecy. Not just any prophecy. Mira moved to touch another section of wall, where a single massive carving dominated the space, a wolf neither fully light nor fully dark, standing at a crossroads with paths leading in opposite directions. One path showed wolves united, running together beneath a joint moon. The other showed only fire and destruction, territory marks burned away, packs scattered. The last prophecy. The final message left by the Silver Moon Elders before they were exterminated. They saw this moment coming. Saw that someday Silverfire and Shadow would create a child capable of either healing our fractured nation or ending it forever. That's insane. Brielle backed away from the wall, from the prophecy, from all of it. That's too much power. Too much responsibility. This is just a child. Just a baby who didn't ask to be part of anyone's ancient plans or mythical destinies. You're right. Draven's hand caught her arm, steadying her. It is too much. But it's also reality. Someone knew about this prophecy. Knew that joining our bloodlines would create this specific child. And they orchestrated everything to make it happen, drugging us, erasing our memories, ensuring you ended up in Kieran's bed so the child would be perceived as his heir rather than mine. Why? The question tore from her throat. Why go through all that? Why not just let you and I meet naturally? Why the deception? Because. Stellan moved to stand before another carving, this one showing two alphas facing each other across a border. The prophecy says, born of betrayal. The child had to be created in circumstances that would tear kingdoms apart. Had to be conceived in a way that would ensure conflict rather than unity. Otherwise it would have brought peace too easily. Brielle finished, the horrible logic clicking into place. Someone doesn't want peace. Someone wants war. Wants our nations to destroy each other. And they created this child as the perfect catalyst, an heir who belongs to both bloodlines, but would be rejected by both kingdoms once the truth came out. Draven's expression had gone dark. A child born of enemy alphas, conceived through deception, capable of unimaginable power. Every kingdom would either want to kill it or control it. There would be no middle ground. No possibility of unity. Only conflict. But they didn't account for one thing. Myra's voice carried a note of something that might have been hope. They didn't account for you both surviving long enough to discover the truth. They expected you dead, Brielle. Expected Kieran to execute you before you ever reached Shadowcrest territory. Expected the child to die with you, becoming a catalyst for war without ever taking a breath. Instead, she survived. Talia closed the ancient book with careful reverence. Survived the fall, survived the river, survived crossing into enemy territory. And now the child grows stronger each day. Protected by both bloodlines. Connected to both kingdoms whether either one wants it or not. Brielle's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the stone floor, her mind reeling. A prophecy. A child capable of either uniting or destroying the wolf nation. And she was carrying it. Had been carrying it for weeks without knowing. Had been running from one alpha to another, thinking she was just trying to survive, when actually she'd been fulfilling some ancient design laid out by wolves who died 2 centuries ago. I can't do this. The words came out broken. I can't be part of this. I'm nobody. I'm a wolf who wanted a quiet life, a family, a place to belong. I don't want to be the mother of some prophesied savior or destroyer. I don't want this responsibility. Draven crouched down before her, his hands cupping her face with surprising gentleness. I know. Trust me, I know. You think I wanted to discover my bloodline was part of some ancient prophecy? That a child I don't even remember conceiving might be the key to my kingdom's survival or destruction. His thumbs brushed away tears she hadn't realized were falling. But wanting doesn't matter. We are where we are. The child exists. The prophecy is in motion. And we can either fight it, or we can try to understand it and maybe find a way to choose the path that doesn't end in ash. How? She met his eyes, desperate for answers she knew he didn't have. How do we choose anything when we don't even know who orchestrated this? Who drugged us? Who planted the evidence against me? Who wants war badly enough to manipulate prophecy itself? We start by accepting what we can't change. His voice was steady, anchoring. The child exists. It's part Silvermoon, part Shadowcrest. It will be powerful beyond anything our generation has seen. Those are facts. What we do with those facts, that's still up to us. The prophecy says the child will choose. Mira knelt beside them, her old eyes kind. Unite or shatter. Heal or destroy. Which means the child needs to be raised by parents who can teach both options. Who can show them the value of peace and the cost of war? Who can guide them to make the choice our ancestors prayed they would make? You're saying I need to stay here. Brielle looked around the ancient chamber, at the carvings that documented her bloodline's rise and fall. Raise this child in Shadowcrest territory. Let Draven be its father even though we can't prove. We can prove it. Draven pulled something from his pocket, a small vial filled with liquid that glowed faintly silver. Myra's tests. Blood magic doesn't lie. That child carries my genetic signature as surely as it carries yours. I am its father, not Kieran. Whatever happened that night we both can't remember. Whatever was done to us, it resulted in this. In you carrying my heir. My child. The words should have felt like chains. Should have felt like one more way she was being used, controlled, made into a tool for someone else's purposes. Instead, they felt like absolution. Like proof that Kieran's betrayal had been complete. He'd executed her for carrying a child that wasn't even his. Had been so quick to believe lies that he'd never questioned whether the timing added up, whether his own seed had taken root, whether the mate he claimed to love could actually be innocent. He would have killed me. The realization settled cold and final in her chest. He would have killed me for carrying your child. For betraying him with his worst enemy. Even though I didn't betray anyone. Even though someone drugged us and stole our choices and created this situation specifically to tear us apart. Yes, Draven's voice was hard. He would have. Which tells you everything you need to know about what kind of alpha he is beneath that golden exterior. What kind of male he is when his pride is threatened. And what kind of alpha are you? She searched his face, looking for deception, for calculation, for any sign that this was just another manipulation. What do you want from me? From this child? You said yourself you plan to use it as leverage against Kieran. To raise his heir as your own and turn it into a weapon. Was that a lie? Or is this prophecy just a convenient excuse to keep me compliant while you wage war? She expected anger at the accusation. Expected his alpha authority to slam down, reminding her that she was in his territory, dependent on his protection, in no position to question his motives. Instead, he smiled. Small, sad, and almost frighteningly genuine. 3 days ago, I would have said you were right. That I planned to use this child exactly as you described. That prophecy or no prophecy, my only concern was destroying Kieran by any means necessary. He stood, pulling her up with him, keeping her hands clasped in his. But then I saw this place. Read the texts. Understood that what we created, accidentally or not, is bigger than either of our kingdoms. Bigger than revenge or war or 5 years of border conflicts. He turned her to face the massive carving on the wall, the wolf at the crossroads, neither light nor dark, choosing which path the future would take. That child could end wolfkind as we know it. Could shatter the fragile peace that keeps us from tearing each other apart completely. Or it could be what finally heals us. What finally proves that enemy bloodlines can join without destroying everything. That old wounds can close. That prophecy doesn't have to mean doom. His voice dropped lower. I want to believe the latter is possible. Which means I need to be better than the alpha I've been. Better than the male who would use a child as a weapon. I need to be someone worthy of raising the wolf that might save us all. Brielle studied his face, looking for the lie, the manipulation, the cold calculation she'd seen in those first days. But all she found was honesty. Raw and uncomfortable and painfully real. And if you can't be that person, she asked quietly, if the war calls and revenge looks easier than prophecy and peace, what happens to me and this child then? Then you run. He said it simply, without hesitation. If I ever become someone you can't trust, someone who would harm that child or use it for purposes beyond its own good, you take it and you run as far and fast as you can. And I'll make sure you have the resources to disappear completely. You'd let me go? Even knowing what the child represents? What power it might have? I'd let you go because of what it represents. His hands squeezed hers gently. Because a child born to fulfill prophecy needs to be protected from wolves who would force it down predetermined paths. Needs the freedom to choose its own destiny. And if I ever forget that, if I ever become the type of alpha who would cage power rather than guide it, then the child is better off without me. Talia made a soft sound of approval. Even Stellan, who'd been watching with obvious skepticism, seemed to relax slightly. Mira simply smiled. I told you he wasn't cruel. Brielle looked back at the wall, at the prophecy carved in stone, at the crossroads where one choice led to unity and the other to destruction. At the weight of 200 years of hope resting on the shoulders of a child who hadn't yet drawn breath. At the impossible position she'd been placed in by wolves who'd orchestrated this situation for purposes she still didn't understand. And beneath all of it, beneath the fear and uncertainty and grief for the life she'd thought she was building, she felt something else stirring. Something that tasted like purpose. Like destiny. Like the fire her mother had tried to hide awakening fully for the first time. She pressed her hand to her stomach, feeling the child pulse with power that grew stronger every day. Feeling the connection to this ancient place, to these stones that remembered when Silver Moon wolves had been bridges instead of threats. To the male standing beside her whose bloodline had mixed with hers in ways that should have been impossible, but felt increasingly inevitable. Teach me. The words came out steady, certain. Teach me about Shadowcrest bloodline magic. About Shadow and what it can do. If I'm going to raise a child of two kingdoms, I need to understand both halves of what it will become. Draven's expression shifted, surprise giving way to something that looked almost like relief. You're staying. I'm staying. She met his eyes directly. Not because I trust you completely. Not because I believe prophecy should dictate our choices. But because that child deserves to know both parents. Deserves to be taught by the bloodlines it carries rather than hidden from one or used by the other. And because... She paused, making herself finish the thought. Because I felt what happened when it woke in your territory. Felt it recognize something in your land, in your power, in you. That child knows its father. And denying them that connection would be cruel. Even though neither of us remembers creating it, memory doesn't make truth. Brielle placed one of his hands over her stomach, letting him feel the pulse of life they'd somehow created together. This does. Whatever was stolen from us that night, whatever choices were taken, this child is the result. And it deserves better than to be born into a war it didn't ask for. Draven's hand pressed gently against her stomach, and for the first time, she saw his alpha mask crack completely. Saw wonder and fear and desperate hope flicker across his face as he felt their child respond to his touch. Felt that double heartbeat sync with something in his own chest. I don't know how to be a father. The admission was barely a whisper. Don't know how to be anything except an alpha fighting to protect his territory. Don't know how to be soft or gentle or any of the things a child needs. Then we'll learn together. She covered his hand with hers. Because I don't know how to be the mother of a prophesied child. Don't know how to raise a wolf capable of destroying kingdoms or saving them. Don't know how to teach balance between fire and shadow when I barely understand my own power. Quite the pair we make. His laugh was rough but genuine. Two broken wolves trying to raise a child that might be the most important wolf born in 2 centuries. 2 wolves who survived when we should have died. Brielle looked around the ancient chamber one last time, at the carvings that told stories of her ancestors. At the prophecy that had waited 200 years to begin unfolding. At the path ahead that offered no certainty except that it would be difficult and dangerous and unlike anything either kingdom had seen. And felt, for the first time since discovering the pregnancy, something that might have been hope. The prophecy says the child will choose, she said quietly. Unite or shatter. Heal or destroy. But maybe the real choice isn't the child's. Maybe it's ours. How we raise them. What we teach them. Whether we show them that enemy bloodlines can coexist without destroying each other. Draven's hand was still pressed against her stomach, still feeling their child pulse with ancient power. You're saying we need to prove the prophecy's good path is possible. Model it before the child is old enough to make their own choice. I'm saying we need to try. She met his eyes, seeing her own uncertainty reflected back. Because if we can't make peace between Silvermoon and Shadowcrest, between 2 bloodlines that supposedly oppose each other, how can we expect a child to unite entire kingdoms? Silence fell, broken only by the drip of water and the whisper of ancient stone holding space for this moment. This choice. This fragile agreement between enemies to become something else. Something undefined but necessary. Finally, Draven nodded. Then we try. We protect the child. Learn our bloodlines. Prepare them for whatever destiny they'll face. His jaw tightened. And we find whoever did this to us. Whoever drugged us and engineered this situation and wants war badly enough to manipulate prophecy itself. Because they're still out there. Still plotting. And they'll come for this child the moment they realize it survived. How do we fight an enemy we can't identify? The same way we do everything else. Draven's smile was sharp. Together. Using every resource both our bloodlines provide. And trusting that whoever orchestrated this didn't account for one crucial variable. What's that? That we'd survive long enough to figure out their game. That we'd find each other. That we'd choose alliance over the conflict they were counting on. His hand squeezed hers. They wanted war. We're going to give them peace. At least between Shadowcrest and whatever Silvermoon fire you carry. Let them try to tear us apart after we've already decided to stand together. Brielle felt something shift in her chest, not quite trust, not quite love, but the foundation on which both might eventually be built. A choice made in an ancient chamber beneath a mountain, witnessed by prophecy and stone and wolves who understood that some bonds transcended logic. We're really doing this. It wasn't a question. We're really doing this. Draven's thumb brushed across her knuckles. Raising a prophesied child. Uniting enemy bloodlines. Trying to prove that wolves can be better than our worst instincts. No pressure. His laugh echoed through the chamber, and the silver symbols on the walls seemed to glow brighter, as if the ancient stones themselves approved. Somewhere in her womb, the child pulsed with warmth and recognition and power that was only beginning to wake. Power that would grow. That would challenge everything. That would demand answers to questions no one had asked in 200 years. But for now, in this moment, they had made a choice. Had stood at their own crossroads and picked a path that neither kingdom expected. Whether it would be enough remained to be seen. But as Draven helped her navigate back through the ancient passages, as torchlight painted their shadows on stone walls carved with prophecy and hope, Brielle allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. To survive. To protect this child. To prove that destiny could be shaped rather than simply endured. And to show whoever had orchestrated this that their careful plans had created something unexpected. Not a weapon. Not a catalyst for war. But a bridge between worlds that refused to burn. Peace lasted exactly 6 days. Brielle woke on the 7th morning to shouting echoing through the cavern system, angry voices, the clash of metal, and beneath it all, a scent that made her blood freeze. Blackthorn wolves. Here. In the heart of Shadowcrest territory. She was on her feet before conscious thought, her hand instinctively covering her stomach. The child pulsed anxiously beneath her palm, responding to her fear with warmth that spread through her ribs like molten silver. Draven appeared in the archway, already armed, his face carved from stone. Stay here. Lock the chamber door. Don't come out until I return. What's happening? Kieran sent emissaries. Claims he's here to negotiate the return of stolen property. His lip curled. Meaning you. Her heart slammed against her ribs. He knows I'm here. Of course he knows. Someone made sure he knows. Same someone who orchestrated everything else. Draven crossed to her, gripping her shoulders. This is the clash the prophecy warned about. The moment when kingdoms are forced to choose sides. When staying neutral becomes impossible. You can't give me back to him. I won't. The promise was absolute. But refusing will mean war. Open, declared war. Not border skirmishes. Not territorial disputes. Full conflict between Blackthorn and Shadowcrest. His eyes searched hers. Are you worth that? Is this child worth thousands of lives? The question should have destroyed her. Should have made her volunteer to go back, to sacrifice herself for the greater good. But the child pulsed beneath her hand, and she thought of the prophecy. of the crossroads, of the choice that had to be made not just by their child someday, but by them right now. Yes, her voice came out steady. We're worth it. Because if you give me back, Kieran will kill me and the child both. And whoever orchestrated this will have won. We'll have proven that prophecy can't stand against political pressure. That ancient bloodlines matter less than maintaining false peace. Draven's expression shifted, approval and grim determination mixing into something fierce. Then we fight. But not here. Not in the sanctuary where civilians shelter. He released her, already moving toward the door. Talia will take you deeper into the mountain. To the place even blackthorn wolves can't reach. Stay there. Protect yourself and the child. And if I fall, don't. She caught his arm. Don't say it. You don't get to promise me protection and then talk about falling in the same breath. His hand covered hers briefly, warmth bleeding through despite the cold steel in his voice. Then I'll say this instead, I will come back. And when I do, Kieran will understand exactly what it means to threaten what's mine. He was gone before she could respond, his footsteps echoing away into passages that led toward confrontation. Toward the moment everything would either hold or shatter. Talia appeared seconds later, silver hair wild, weapons strapped across her back. Come. Now. The tunnels. Shouting erupted closer. Too close. The sound of fighting spilled into the main cavern, snarls and impact and the wet sound of claws tearing flesh. They'd already broken through. Brielle's power stirred beneath her skin, silver fire wanting to wake, wanting to protect. But she was too new to this. Didn't know how to control it. Didn't know if using it would harm the child or strengthen enemies who might be watching. This way. Talia grabbed her hand, dragging her toward a hidden passage Brielle hadn't noticed before. The Alpha gave orders, you survive above all else. Even if it means leaving him behind. Even if. A massive form crashed through the archway, gray fur and gold eyes that weren't Draven's. Corvin. The same guard who'd chased her to the cliff on Blackthorn Land. Still loyal to Kieran. Still hunting. Found her. His voice was rough with satisfaction. The traitor. The whore who carries bastard get while wearing our Alpha's mark. Talia moved between them, weapons drawn. Stand down, Blackthorn. This is sovereign Shadowcrest territory. You have no authority here. I have my Alpha's command. Return what was stolen. By force if necessary. Corvin's muscles bunched, preparing to strike. She wasn't stolen. She fled for her life from an Alpha who sentenced her to death without trial. Talia's voice was steel. From an Alpha so weak he believes fabricated evidence over his own mate. Careful, Shadowwalker. That's your future corpse talking. Corvin lunged. The fight was brutal and brief. Talia was skilled, fast, lethal. But Corvin was larger, driven by righteous fury and absolute loyalty to orders. He got past her guard, slammed her into the wall hard enough to crack stone, and turned his attention to Brielle. Time to go home, traitor. Face what you've done. Face justice. Brielle backed away, her hands spreading instinctively as silver fire began to leak between her fingers. I've done nothing. Everything you believe is a lie. Everything Kieran told you. Kieran is my Alpha. His word is law. His judgment is absolute. Corvin advanced, claws extending. And his judgment is death. The fire erupted before she could stop it, silver flames that consumed air and flesh with equal hunger. Corvin screamed, his fur igniting, his skin blistering beneath heat that burned without smoke. The scent of charred meat filled the passage. But even dying, he lunged. Caught Brielle's arm with claws that tore through muscle to bone. Pain exploded white-hot up her shoulder, the same shoulder that hadn't fully healed from her escape. Blood splashed across stone. Then Corvin was falling, Talia's blade protruding from his spine. The guard ripped her weapon free, let his body crumple, and caught Brielle before she could collapse. We move. Now. Before more come. They ran deeper into the mountain, leaving Corvin's smoking corpse behind. Leaving the sounds of battle that raged in the main cavern. Leaving everything except the desperate need to survive. Brielle's arm screamed with every step, blood running hot down her side. The child pulsed frantically, distressed by her pain, by the violence, by the fire she'd released without meaning to. She'd killed him. Had burned a wolf alive with power she barely understood. Had taken a life to protect her own. The realization should have broken her. Should have made her question everything. Instead, all she felt was grim satisfaction. He'd come to kill her. To kill her child. She'd done what was necessary. And if that made her a monster, so be it. Better to be a living monster than a dead saint. They reached a chamber so deep the air tasted of minerals and ancient water. Talia barred the entrance with a boulder that took all her strength to move, then turned to examine Brielle's wounds. Bad. Not fatal. But you'll scar. Her hands worked quickly, tearing cloth for bandages, pressing herbs against torn flesh. The Alpha will be furious. Because I'm damaged? Because you were hurt on his watch. On his land. Under his protection. Talia's smile was grim. He takes his vows seriously. Someone will pay for this. Good. Brielle's voice came out harder than she'd ever heard it. Let them pay. Let Kieran understand that I'm not his property to reclaim. Let whoever orchestrated this know that their weapon has teeth. Above them, muffled by stone and distance, battle raged. Kingdoms clashed. The fragile piece shattered exactly as someone had planned. And in the depths of the mountain, bleeding and furious and more alive than she'd felt in months, Brielle understood something crucial. She wasn't running anymore. She was done being the piece moved across someone else's board. From now on, she would be the storm they couldn't predict. The fire they couldn't control. Let the world fight back. She'd burn it down if that's what it took to protect this child. The prophecy had promised a choice: unite or shatter. Right now, with blood on her hands and fury in her heart, shattering felt very, very tempting. Draven found her 3 hours later, when the battle had ended and Blackthorn wolves had been driven back across the border. He entered the deep chamber covered in blood, some his, most not, and the sight of her bandaged arm made something dangerous flash across his face. Who? The single word carried the weight of absolute authority and barely leashed violence. Corvin. He's dead. Brielle met his eyes without flinching. I burned him. With silver fire. It felt good. Something shifted in his expression, not horror at her admission, but understanding. He crossed to her, his movements controlled despite obvious exhaustion, and knelt beside where she sat against the chamber wall. Let me see. His hands were gentle as they unwrapped Talia's bandages, examining the deep claw marks that ran from shoulder to elbow. His jaw tightened. These will scar. I don't care about scars. I do. His thumb traced the edge of the wound carefully. These are marks of my failure. I promise to protect you. Let you be harmed anyway. You were fighting an army. I was fighting one wolf. She caught his hand, stopping its exploration of her injuries. You didn't fail. You drove them back. Kept them from reaching me until I could defend myself. You shouldn't have to defend yourself. He stopped, the words catching on something. That's supposed to be my responsibility. Why? The question came out softer than intended. Why is protecting me your responsibility? Why does it matter so much to you? We barely know each other. Everything between us was engineered by someone else. The child, the prophecy, even this, she gestured between them, this connection we're building. None of it's real. None of it's chosen. Draven was quiet for a long moment, his golden eyes studying her face in the dim light of the single torch Talia had left burning. When he spoke, his voice was rough. You're right. None of it was chosen at first. We were manipulated. Used. Had our agency stolen along with our memories. His hand turned in hers, their fingers threading together. But what we do now? That's choice. Every moment I spend learning who you are instead of treating you like a strategic asset, that's choice. Every time you trust me enough to stay instead of running, that's choice. Every breath this child takes in my territory while growing stronger, that's all of us choosing something different than what we were supposed to choose. His other hand moved to cup her face, his touch carrying warmth that had nothing to do with pack bonds or magical compulsion. I protect you because in 1 week, you've become more real to me than anything in my kingdom. Because you question me, challenge me, force me to be better than the cold alpha who'd use a child as a weapon. You make me want to be someone worthy of raising that prophesied wolf. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. So yes, your wounds matter. Your pain matters. Your survival matters. Not because of prophecy or bloodlines or political strategy, but because you matter. Just you. Brielle's breath caught. She'd expected many things from this alpha: calculation, desire, strategic alliance. But not this raw honesty. Not this vulnerability that made him seem less like an untouchable predator and more like a man trying desperately not to fail at something he'd never attempted before. I killed someone today. The confession spilled out before she could stop it. Used power I barely understand to burn a wolf alive. And I didn't feel guilty. Didn't feel horror or regret or anything except satisfaction that he couldn't hurt me anymore. Couldn't hurt the child. Her voice cracked. What does that make me? Alive. Draven's answer was immediate. It makes you alive and fierce and exactly what this child needs. Not a weak mother who'd let threats eliminate her out of misplaced guilt, but a strong one who'll burn the world down if that's what protecting her young requires. He leaned closer, his forehead almost touching hers. You think I don't understand that feeling? The savage satisfaction of removing threats? The knowledge that some wolves only understand violence? That's not monstrosity, Brielle. That's survival. That's the foundation every good parent needs, the willingness to be brutal when gentleness fails. Kieran used to say violence was weakness. That true strength was maintaining control without bloodshed. Kieran's a hypocrite who wages war while preaching peace. Draven's voice hardened. Who orders executions while claiming moral superiority. At least I'm honest about what I am. At least I don't pretend gentleness while wielding a blade. He was right. She'd seen Kieran's true face in that council chamber, cold, calculating, quick to destroy what threatened his carefully constructed image. All his speeches about peace and restraint had been performance. Propaganda to make his kingdom seem more civilized than Shadowcrest's brutal honesty. Draven might be violent, but he was honest about it. Might be dangerous, but he owned that danger instead of hiding behind noble lies. I don't know if I can trust you. The words felt important to say aloud. Don't know if what I'm feeling is real or just desperation. Don't know if I'm staying because this is right or because I have nowhere else to go. Then don't trust me yet. His hands framed her face, holding her gaze. Question everything. Challenge every decision I make about you or the child. Keep one foot pointed toward escape if that's what you need. But don't lie to yourself about what's happening between us. Don't pretend you don't feel it too. Feel what? This. He kissed her, not roughly, not claiming, but with careful intensity that made her bones melt. His lips moved against hers like he was asking permission, offering rather than demanding. Like he understood she'd been controlled enough for a lifetime and refused to be another cage. Brielle's hands moved to his chest, feeling muscle and scars and the steady beat of a heart that shouldn't matter, but somehow did. The kiss deepened, became something desperate and hungry and complicated by everything they were: enemies, allies, parents to a child neither had planned, wolves building trust on the ruins of manipulation. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Draven's eyes had gone molten gold. That, he said roughly. That's real. That's chosen. That's something no one engineered or prophesied or controlled. Just you and me and whatever this is becoming. Brielle's hand moved to her stomach, feeling the child pulse with approval. With warmth. As if even the unborn heir understood that something important had just shifted. I want to believe you, she whispered. Want to believe this is real and good and not just another way I'm being used. Then believe this. Draven's hands covered hers over her stomach. I will protect this child with my life. Will teach them everything I know about shadow and power and leadership. Will stand beside you while we raise them to make the choice that saves our world. His voice dropped lower. And I will never force you to stay. Never trap you with bonds you didn't choose. If you want to leave, I'll help you disappear so completely that no one will ever find you. That's my vow. As an alpha. As this child's father. As someone who's starting to care about you far more than strategy suggests is wise. The offer should have sounded too good to be true. Should have raised every warning instinct she possessed. Instead, it felt like freedom. Like being given choice when she'd expected only demands. I'm not leaving. The decision settled into her bones with certainty. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because you're right, this is real. Whatever else was orchestrated, whatever plans were made for us, this connection is ours. We're building something no one predicted. Draven pulled her carefully against his chest, mindful of her injured arm. His heart beat steady beneath her ear, and for the first time since the world had fallen apart, Brielle let herself rest. Let herself believe that maybe she'd found something worth fighting for. Not just survival. Not just protection for her child. But partnership. Alliance. The beginning of trust built on honesty instead of pretty lies. We should sleep, Draven murmured against her hair. Tomorrow brings new challenges. Always does. Stay. The word was out before she could reconsider. Just tonight. Just so I know you're real. His arms tightened around her. I'm not going anywhere. And wrapped in the embrace of an enemy-turned ally, carrying a child of prophecy, bearing scars earned protecting herself instead of waiting for rescue, Brielle finally slept without nightmares. The storm was coming. War was inevitable. Whoever had orchestrated their circumstances would strike again. But for tonight, they had this. Had each other. Had the fragile beginning of something that might be strong enough to weather what came next. Or might shatter under the weight. Only time would tell. Morning brought revelation in the form of a single messenger. Brielle woke to find Draven already gone, his warmth replaced by cold stone. She dressed quickly, ignoring the protest from her injured arm, and followed voices to the main cavern. What she found stopped her heart. Kieran stood in the center of Shadowcrest Sanctuary, surrounded by Draven's guards, looking nothing like the alpha who'd sentenced her to death. He looked broken. Haunted. Like someone who'd discovered too late what he'd lost. Brielle. Her name on his lips was prayer and apology. Thank the gods you're alive. She couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't reconcile this version of Kieran with the cold stranger who'd ordered her execution. Draven stood to the side, his expression unreadable, but his posture screamed danger barely leashed. Explain why I shouldn't kill you where you stand. Draven's voice could have frozen blood. You sent wolves to attack my territory. To retrieve property you'd already thrown away. Give me one reason your life has value. Because I was wrong. Kieran's voice cracked. Because the evidence was fabricated. Because someone orchestrated everything, the accusations, the testimony, the timing. I discovered it 2 days ago when one of the witnesses confessed on her deathbed. Admitted she'd been paid. Threatened. Forced to lie about what she'd seen. Brielle's vision swam. You're saying, you believe me now? Now that it's convenient? Now that I've already escaped and nearly died and... I'm saying I was a fool. Kieran took a step toward her, and every guard in the cavern tensed. I'm saying I let pride and fear cloud judgment. Let political pressure override what I knew in my bones, that you could never betray me. That you loved me as much as I loved you. Loved. Draven's laugh was ugly. Past tense. Interesting choice. Kieran's eyes never left Brielle's face. I came to bring you home. To beg forgiveness. To offer anything, everything, if you'll just give me another chance to prove I'm not the monster who sentenced you to death. The words should have been everything she'd wanted to hear. Should have been vindication and justice and proof that her innocence mattered. Instead, they felt hollow. Too late. Tainted by everything that had happened since. You're 7 days too late. Her voice came out steady despite the chaos in her chest. 7 days. That's how long it took you to discover the truth. To question whether executing your mate was the right choice. I know. I know it's unforgivable. It is. She cut him off. It's unforgivable. Because in those 7 days, I jumped off a cliff. Nearly drowned. Bled in the rain. Gave birth to understanding that I'm carrying a child you would have killed without ever knowing it existed. Her hand moved to her stomach. A child you would have murdered because your pride mattered more than truth. Kieran's face went white. A child. His eyes dropped to her stomach, and something complicated crossed his expression. My heir. You're carrying my heir. No. Draven's voice cut through the cavern like a blade. She's not. Silence fell, absolute and terrible. Kieran's gaze snapped to Draven, then back to Brielle, understanding dawning with devastating clarity. No, that's not possible. We were mated. The bond was faked. Draven produced the vial of silver liquid, the blood magic proof. 3 months ago, someone drugged us both. Erased our memories. Created circumstances where Brielle would be in your bed the morning after your ceremony while carrying my child. My heir. Conceived hours before you ever touched her. You're lying. But Kieran's voice lacked conviction. You're saying this to keep her. To hurt me. Too. I'm saying it because it's true. Brielle's words fell like stones. The child responds to Shadowcrest territory. Grows stronger here than it ever did in Blackthorn lands. The blood magic doesn't lie. Neither does prophecy carved in stone 2 centuries old. She met Kieran's eyes directly. I'm carrying Draven's child. Was carrying it when you sentenced me to death. When you chose your kingdom's stability over investigating whether your mate might be innocent. Kieran staggered like he'd been struck. This is what they wanted. Whoever orchestrated this, they wanted exactly this moment. Wanted me to discover the truth too late. Wanted you to choose him over me. Wanted our kingdoms to tear each other apart over a child that will decide all our fates. Draven moved to stand beside Brielle, his hand finding hers. Over prophecy fulfilled. Over bloodlines mixed that were never supposed to touch. Yes, they got exactly what they wanted. Except for one thing. What's that? They didn't account for us choosing each other. Brielle's voice was strong, certain. Didn't expect Brielle to survive long enough to discover the truth. Didn't expect me to value her safety over political strategy. Didn't expect a child born of manipulation to become something we'd both die protecting. Kieran's expression twisted grief and rage and realization warring for dominance. So this is it. You're choosing him. Choosing the enemy over everything we built. Over 3 years of. You destroyed what we built the moment you believed lies over love. Brielle's words were final. You threw away 3 years in one morning. Ordered my death without trial. Without question. Without giving me a chance to defend myself. She stepped closer to Draven, their hands still joined. He's given me more respect in 7 days than you showed me in 3 years. So yes, I'm choosing him. I'm choosing the father of my child over the alpha who would have killed us both. This child, Kieran's voice broke. This child will tear our kingdoms apart. We'll start a war that destroys everything. Then let it. Draven's voice carried absolute conviction. Let the kingdoms fall if they can't handle truth. If they can't accept that prophecy has spoken and change is inevitable. I will not sacrifice this child to maintain false peace. Will not give up Brielle to satisfy political convenience. And I will destroy anyone, including you, old enemy, who threatens what's mine. The promise hung in the air, heavy with certainty and the weight of decisions that couldn't be unmade. Kieran looked between them, seeing what had been built in 7 days. Seeing his own failure reflected in Brielle's choice. Seeing the future crumbling into war. Then war it is. His voice went cold. Because I will not accept this. Will not let Shadowcrest steal my mate and claim victory. Will not let that child grow up calling you father when. When what? Brielle's laugh was sharp. When you threw me away. When you would have killed it before it drew breath. You have no claim here, Kieran. No rights. No future with me or this child. You destroyed that yourself. I'll take it by force if necessary. Try. Draven's smile showed teeth. Come at us with everything you have. Wage your war. And watch your kingdom fall around you while prophecy unfolds exactly as it was meant to. Because that child will be raised in Shadowcrest. We'll learn both bloodlines. will be given the choice our ancestors prayed for: unite or shatter. And whatever they choose, it will be their choice. Not yours. Not mine. Theirs. Kieran's hands clenched into fists, every line of his body screaming violence, barely restrained. This isn't over. Yes. Brielle's voice was final. It is. Go home, Kieran. Mourn what you destroyed. And know that every wolf who dies in the war you're about to start, their blood is on your hands. Not mine. Not Draven's. Yours. For a moment, Kieran looked like he might attack anyway. Might try to take her by force despite being surrounded by enemies. Then his shoulders sagged, and she saw the alpha mask crack completely. Saw the male beneath lost, broken, realizing too late what his pride had cost. I loved you, he whispered. I know. Her response was gentle despite everything. But love isn't enough when trust is gone. When safety is conditional. When survival depends on choosing someone who'll fight for you instead of against you. She squeezed Draven's hand. I'm sorry, but this is my choice. My decision. And I'm not changing my mind. Kieran looked at her for one more moment, memorizing her face, saying goodbye to what they'd been. Then he turned and walked away, his guards falling in around him, leaving Shadowcrest's sanctuary without looking back. When he was gone, when the echoes of his footsteps had faded into distant passages, Brielle finally let herself breathe. He'll come back with an army. Her voice was barely a whisper. I know. Draven pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her. Let him come. Let them all come. We'll face it together. This is what they wanted. Whoever orchestrated this, they're celebrating right now. Their plan worked. Maybe. Draven's hand moved to her stomach, covering the life growing there. Or maybe they'll discover that prophecy has teeth they didn't account for. That a child born of manipulation can still choose light over darkness. Unity over destruction. You really believe that? I believe in you. He tilted her face up, his eyes fierce and certain. In us. In this impossible thing we're building. And I believe that whatever comes next, we face it as we are honest, flawed, determined to give this child a chance at making the right choice. Brielle leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his power mixing with her own silver fire. Feeling the child pulse with approval. The storm was here. War was inevitable. Blood would be spilled and kingdoms would burn and wolves would die for a child that hadn't been born. But standing in the arms of an alpha who'd proven his loyalty through action instead of words, Brielle felt something that might have been hope. Prophecy said the child would choose unite or shatter. She would make sure they had both options to choose from. Would teach them fire and shadow, light and dark, the cost of war and the value of peace. And would trust that when the time came, they'd be wise enough to choose survival over destruction. Whether the kingdoms deserved it or not. The attack came at dawn, 3 weeks later. Brielle woke to the sound of war drums, the ancient call that meant invasion, that meant every wolf in Shadowcrest territory needed to arm themselves and prepare to defend what was theirs. She was on her feet instantly, her hand moving to the weapons Draven had insisted she learn to use despite her pregnancy. The child was stronger now. Visible now. A slight swell to her stomach that proclaimed to anyone with eyes exactly what she carried. What she protected. Draven burst through the door, already in partial shift, claws extended, eyes pure molten gold, power radiating from him like heat from a forge. They're here. Blackthorn and 3 allied kingdoms. Kieran brought an army. How many? Too many. His voice was grim. They're demanding your surrender. Claiming the child is stolen property. That you're a kidnapped mate held against your will. His jaw clenched. They're giving us 1 hour to produce you or they level the mountain. Brielle's silver fire stirred beneath her skin, responding to threat with hunger to burn. Then we fight. You can't. The child is exactly why I have to fight. She gripped his arm, forcing him to meet her eyes. This is the moment, Draven. The one prophecy warned about. When I have to choose whether I'm a victim waiting to be rescued or a weapon that can't be controlled. When I prove that Silver Moon Fire isn't just legend, it's power that can change everything. You're not ready. The magic is unstable. Using it could harm. Doing nothing will definitely harm the child. We'll get you killed. We'll destroy everything we've built. Her voice dropped lower, fierce with certainty. I'm not hiding anymore. Not running. Not waiting for men to decide my fate while I cower in the dark. This is my fight. My child. My choice. Something shifted in Draven's expression, fear giving way to understanding. To acceptance that the female before him wasn't the broken wolf who'd crawled from the river. She was something else now. Something forged by betrayal and survival and 3 weeks learning to wield fire that could consume kingdoms. Then we stand together. He pulled her close, kissed her hard and desperate. But promise me, if it goes wrong, if the fire becomes too much, you'll run. You'll take the child and disappear and let me buy you time. No promises I won't keep. She kissed him back, tasting fear and fury and desperate hope. Now let's show them what happens when they threaten what's ours. They emerged from the sanctuary together. Brielle in leather armor Talia had modified to accommodate her growing stomach, Draven in the full regalia of Shadowcrest's alpha. Behind them came every wolf who called this territory home, warriors, healers, elders who could barely walk but refused to hide while their kingdom burned. The enemy waited beyond the main entrance. Thousands of wolves spread across the valley, their numbers turning the landscape into a sea of fur and teeth and absolute conviction that they were right. That she was stolen property. That the child she carried belonged to anyone except the parents who'd chosen to protect it. Kieran stood at the front, flanked by alphas from territories she recognized: Ironridge, Stormclaw, Northmere. Kingdoms that had allied with Blackthorn against Shadowcrest's supposed aggression. Against the narrative Kieran had spun of an enemy alpha stealing his pregnant mate and corrupting his heir. Brielle. Kieran's voice carried across the distance. Please, come home. End this before wolves die for a lie. The only lie here is yours. Her voice rang out, amplified somehow by silver fire singing in her veins. You sentenced me to death. Ordered my execution. Would have killed me and this child without trial or mercy or second thought. And now you claim to want me back? Now you pretend you were the victim. You don't understand what you're doing. What Draven has convinced you to believe. That child is mine. She stepped forward, feeling power coil beneath her skin like a living thing. Mine and his. Conceived before you ever touched me. Proven by blood magic and prophecy, and the fact that it thrives in territory you claim is hostile. You have no claim here, Kieran. No rights. Only the army you've convinced to fight for your wounded pride. Then we take you by force. One of the allied alphas, Garrick of Ironridge, moved forward. You're clearly compromised. Under compulsion. Speaking words planted by an enemy who's twisted your mind. Compromised. Brielle's laugh was sharp. You think I'm compromised because I choose the father who wants this child over the alpha who would have murdered it? Because I choose honesty over pretty lies? Because I refuse to sacrifice myself and my unborn heir to make you all feel better about your prejudices. Silver fire leaked from her hands, dripping onto stone that hissed and steamed but didn't burn. The army stirred, fear rippling through their ranks as they saw what she carried. What she could do. That's Silver Moon Fire, someone whispered. She's one of them. One of the cursed bloodline. Yes. Brielle let the fire spread, let it crawl up her arms in patterns that looked almost like wings. I'm Silver Moon. Last of a bloodline you tried to exterminate because our power scared you. Because we could challenge alpha commands and break pack bonds and refuse to be controlled. She raised her hands, and the fire blazed brighter. And this child I carry? It's half Silver Moon, half Shadowcrest. 2 bloodlines that were never supposed to mix. 2 powers that create something your prophecies warned about, a wolf capable of uniting kingdoms or destroying them completely. Which is exactly why that child can't be allowed to exist. Garrick's voice was hard. Why we have to end this before? Before what? Draven stepped forward, his shadow magic rising to meet her fire, darkness, and light swirling together, creating patterns that made the army fall back. Before you have to accept that change is inevitable, that your careful hierarchy of who deserves power and who should be exterminated is crumbling, before you're forced to admit that a child born of enemies might be exactly what this world needs, that child is an abomination. Kieran's voice cracked. A violation of everything natural and right. And I will not let it grow up calling my worst enemy father. Will not let Shadowcrest claim victory through manipulated bloodlines and stolen futures. Then come take it. Brielle's fire exploded outward, creating a wall between Shadowcrest wolves and the army. Come through this. Come through me. And learn exactly what happens when you threaten a mother who carries fire in her veins and will burn the world down before letting you harm her child. The army hesitated. Thousands of wolves, all trained warriors, all loyal to their alphas, and they hesitated before one pregnant female and the power she wielded. She's bluffing. Garrick snarled. She can't maintain that. Pregnant wolves can't access full power without harming their young. She'll burn out in minutes. Want to test that theory? Brielle's smile was all teeth. Want to discover if Silvermoon fire follows normal rules? If a child of prophecy allows its mother to be weak when everything depends on her being strong. She pulled deeper on the power, feeling it answer without the pain she'd expected. Feeling the child not weakened, but strengthened by what flowed through her. As if the air recognized this moment, understood that survival depended on proving they couldn't be threatened, couldn't be controlled, couldn't be sacrificed to maintain false peace. The firewall grew higher, hotter, silver flames reaching toward the sky like a second sun. And where it touched ground, symbols appeared, ancient silver moon marks that glowed and pulsed and spread like living things. Marks that declared this ground sacred, protected, untouchable by anyone who came with violence in their hearts. Impossible, Mira breathed from behind Brielle. Those are sanctuary marks. Only the most powerful Silvermoon elders could create them. She's accessing power that shouldn't exist anymore. She's accessing what she needs to protect her young. Draven's voice carried quiet what any mother would access if they carried the right bloodline and enough desperation. She's magnificent. Kieran stared at the firewall, at the symbols, at the female he'd thrown away transforming into something he couldn't control and couldn't defeat. Brielle, please, don't do this. Don't force me to attack. Don't make me responsible for what? For the deaths that will result from your pride. She let the fire pulse brighter. I'm not making you do anything, Kieran. You chose this. Chose to believe lies over truth. Chose to execute first and investigate later. Chose to bring an army instead of accepting that I made a choice that didn't include you. Her voice softened slightly. I'm sorry it came to this. Sorry you couldn't let go. But I will not sacrifice my child to spare your feelings. Will not walk into death to make you feel vindicated. Then you've chosen war. No. Draven's hand found hers, their powers mixing silver fire and shadow, creating something neither light nor dark but both. You chose war when you couldn't accept that some things can't be controlled. That some wolves will always choose freedom over security. That prophecy doesn't bend to political convenience. His voice hardened. So attack if you must. Throw your armies against fire and shadow. And watch them break on power that was forged specifically to resist wolves like you. The standoff stretched, tension pulling tighter with each passing second. Thousands of wolves on one side. 2 alphas and their kingdom on the other. And between them, a pregnant female wielding fire that could consume them all if pushed far enough. Then movement from the army, not forward in attack, but backward in retreat. Wolves from Northmere breaking formation, their alpha raising a hand in refusal. I didn't agree to attack a pregnant female. His voice carried clearly. Didn't agree to harm a child who hasn't been born yet. Whatever disputes exist between you, they're yours. Not mine. Northmere withdraws. Coward. Garrick spat the word. Pragmatist. The Northmere Alpha turned his back on the standoff. I won't be responsible for the slaughter that comes from attacking Silvermoon fire. Won't be the Alpha who tried to murder a prophesied child. History remembers those wolves. And history isn't kind. His wolves followed, a quarter of the army breaking away and disappearing into the forest. Then Stormclaw withdrew. Then smaller packs who'd allied with Blackthorn. One by one, pieces of Kieran's army fractured and fell away, unwilling to be part of this particular fight. Unwilling to be remembered as the wolves who tried to kill a mother and child for political convenience. Until only Blackthorn and Ironridge remained. Only Kieran and Garrick and their loyalists, staring at fire they couldn't cross and a female they couldn't break. "This isn't over," Kieran said quietly. "Yes," Brielle replied. "It is. Go home. Mourn. Move on. But don't come back here. Don't threaten this child again. Because next time, I won't just create walls. I'll create graves." The promise hung in the air, not empty threat, but absolute certainty. She would kill to protect what was hers. Would burn kingdoms if that's what it took. And looking at her face, at the fire dancing in her eyes, Kieran finally understood. He'd lost. Completely. Irrevocably. The female he'd loved was gone, replaced by something fiercer. Something that belonged to his enemy and would never return. He turned and walked away, his remaining wolves following. Left the valley empty except for Shadowcrest wolves and the firewall that still burned, marking sanctuary that couldn't be violated. When they were gone, Brielle let the fire die. Let the power sink back beneath her skin. And collapsed into Draven's arms as exhaustion hit like a physical blow. "I did it," she whispered. "Protected us. Proved we can't be threatened. You were incredible." He held her carefully, supporting her weight. Magnificent and terrifying, and exactly what this child needs. The child pulsed beneath her heart, not weakened by the display but strengthened. As if it had drunk deep of power and found it nourishing. As if prophecy had awakened fully and decided to fight for survival. War had been avoided. For now. But the cost was written in Kieran's face as he'd walked away. In the allied kingdoms who'd withdrawn. In the knowledge that Shadowcrest now stood alone against a world that feared what they protected. All they could do was survive. Protect. Prepare for the moment when the child would be born and prophecy would demand its choice. Unite or shatter. Heal or destroy. The future balanced on the edge of a knife. And they would face it together. 6 months passed like held breath. The child grew. Brielle's stomach swelled with life that kicked and pulsed with power that sometimes leaked silver light through her skin. Draven was there for everything, every milestone, every fear, every moment when prophecy felt too heavy and she wondered if they were strong enough to bear it. They learned each other. Learned to blend fire and shadow without burning. Learned to trust that what had started as manipulation could become something real, something chosen, something worth fighting for. The kingdoms watched from distance, waiting to see what would be born. What power would wake when prophecy's child drew first breath. And on a night when 3 moons rose full and silver light painted the ancient sanctuary in colors that didn't exist in normal world, Brielle's labor began. She'd thought she understood pain. Thought betrayal and clawed wounds and jumping off cliffs had taught her the limits of suffering. She'd been wrong. Labor was fire and tearing and a body trying to turn itself inside out to birth something too big, too powerful, too impossible to exist. She screamed until her voice broke. Bled until the stone beneath her ran red. Felt her power surge and recede in waves that synchronized with contractions, creating patterns of light that made the ancient carvings glow like they were alive. Draven never left. Held her hand. Whispered promises and encouragement and desperate pleas for her to survive this. For the child to survive. For prophecy to be gentle when it had never been gentle before. Mira worked with steady hands and ancient knowledge, guiding the birth with herbs and power and prayers to gods that might or might not be listening. And finally, after hours that felt like years, after pain that transcended anything physical and became something spiritual, the child was born. A girl. Perfect and screaming and radiating power that made every wolf in the sanctuary fall to their knees. Power that was silver, fire, and shadow both, swirling together in patterns that shouldn't exist, but did. power that sang of prophecy fulfilled, of bloodlines mixed, of a child who would reshape everything. Draven cut the cord with trembling hands, wrapped his daughter in furs, placed her on Brielle's chest with reverence, usually reserved for sacred objects. "She's perfect," he whispered. "Absolutely perfect." Brielle looked down at the face of her daughter, eyes that shifted between gold and silver, skin that seemed to glow from within, tiny fingers that already showed the elongated shape of claws. At the child who would someday choose whether kingdoms united or shattered, and felt love so fierce it transcended fear, transcended prophecy, transcended everything except the primal need to protect this small life at any cost. "What do we name her?" Her voice was hoarse from screaming. Draven's hand covered hers, their daughters, binding them together. "Something that means hope. Something that promises she'll have the strength to choose wisely when the time comes." "Lumi," Brielle said, and somehow knew it was right. Light in darkness. Fire in shadow. Hope in the midst of chaos. "Lumi," Draven repeated, testing the name. Then smiled, rare and genuine and unguarded. "Perfect. She's Lumi. Our daughter. Our hope." But even as they held their daughter, even as relief and love and exhaustion blurred together, Brielle felt something else. A tremor through the earth. A shift in power. As if Lumi's birth had triggered something vast and unstoppable. In kingdoms near and far, wolves would be feeling it, sensing the moment prophecy had awakened, knowing that the child who could unite or destroy them had been born. And somewhere in the darkness, whoever had orchestrated everything was watching, planning their next move, preparing to claim what they'd worked so hard to create. The fight wasn't over. It was only beginning. But holding her daughter, feeling Draven's presence solid and sure beside her, Brielle found herself unafraid. Let them come. Let prophecy unfold. Let the world tear itself apart trying to control or kill or corrupt this child. She was Silvermoon. He was Shadowcrest. Together they were fire and shadow mixed, impossible and inevitable, forged by betrayal into something stronger than either could have been alone. And they would raise this child to be strong enough to carry the weight of worlds on her shoulders. To look at the crossroads and choose not just survival, but transformation. Not just peace, but justice. Not just unity, but genuine change that made kingdoms better than they'd been. Or they would raise her to burn it all down and start fresh. To reject the systems that had hunted Silvermoon bloodlines and manipulated destinies and sacrificed innocence for political convenience. Either way, the choice would be Lumi's. And they would make damn sure she had the strength, wisdom, and courage to choose well. The 3 moons shone down through natural skylights in the ancient stone, bathing them in silver light that seemed to bless what they'd created. What they'd chosen to protect. What they'd refused to sacrifice despite every pressure to do so. And in that moment, Brielle understood. Prophecy hadn't been about the child at all. It had been about the parents. About whether 2 enemies could become allies. Whether betrayal could transform into trust. Whether love could grow from manipulation and become something real enough to anchor a child who would carry impossible power. They'd passed the test. Had proven that change was possible. That bloodlines meant less than choices. That destiny could be shaped instead of simply endured. Now it was Lumi's turn. And they would be there every step, teaching her that power was responsibility, that prophecy was invitation rather than command, that she could be anything except helpless. The storm was coming. War was inevitable. Wolves would die and kingdoms would burn and nothing would ever be simple again. But for tonight, they had this. Had each other. Had a daughter who was hope incarnate, sleeping peacefully between them, unaware of the weight she carried. Tomorrow would bring challenges. But tonight was peace. And sometimes that had to be enough. So here's the question that matters, the one that will haunt you long after this story ends. Would you have chosen her side? Would you have looked at a pregnant female marked as traitor, carrying a child of prophecy, and seen victim worth saving or threat worth eliminating? Would you have been Kieran, choosing pride over truth, letting fear dictate justice? Or would you have been Draven, choosing to protect what society said should be destroyed, choosing to see worth where others saw only danger? Would you have believed that enemies could become allies? That prophecy could be shaped. That love could grow from ashes and become something strong enough to change everything? Because that's the real question prophecy asks. Not what the child will choose someday, but what we choose right now. Whether we're brave enough to protect impossible things. Whether we're wise enough to see that different doesn't mean dangerous. Whether we're strong enough to stand against entire kingdoms when standing alone is all that's right. Brielle chose fire when ice would have been easier. Chose truth when lies were more comfortable. Chose life for her child when sacrifice would have earned approval. And the world will never be the same. If this story lit something inside you, if you felt Brielle's fear, Draven's desperation, Kieran's regret, if you want to know what happens when Lumi grows up and faces her own crossroads, when the wolves who orchestrated everything finally reveal themselves, when prophecy demands its final choice, then you need to stay with Cindy's Wolfheart stories. Because here, we don't tell safe tales about perfect heroes and simple choices. We tell stories about wolves who survive impossible situations. About females who burn kingdoms rather than break. About prophecies that bend to courage instead of destiny. About love that grows in the darkest places and becomes something fierce enough to change the world. Subscribe. Because Lumi's story is just beginning. And you're going to want to be there when she finally chooses unite or shatter, heal or destroy, become the savior her parents prayed for or the destroyer the kingdoms feared. The crossroads is waiting. And the choice, well, that's still being written. Welcome to the pack. We've been waiting for you.